with ODE, and we're having a great time. The sessions are fantastic. So welcome.
Good. And Terry Weekert, our OFLA, we cannot give enough thank you to OFLA for working with us on this, for hosting the Zoom sessions, for bumping us from 100 to 500 participants. So I want to give, we can't say enough for OFLA, and I know Terry's going to give a quick, little mention here too, but please, if you can support OFLA, they're one of the best state organizations in the country. But Terry, go ahead.
Well, thank you. I'm the OFLA membership chair, and of course my plea is always to please join OFLA. We can use your support as we continue working with ODE and providing professional development through the next school year. So, and I'll put in the chat box how to do that. Thanks, Kat.
Perfect, good. All right, so as Ryan said, we're really excited about today's session because we're sort of turning a little bit of a corner. If you've been coming to these, which I know a lot of you have been because I recognize so many names, is a lot of this is the last several weeks have been laying the foundation of how to get ready for the fall and those big ideas and planning. And today is where we actually start getting into some nitty gritty of okay, what's it going to actually look like in my classroom? So from here on out, we're trying to make it a little bit more hands-on. So to start with, though, I want everyone just throw it in the chat box as I'm getting ready to share my screen. Actually, before I do that, Nella, go ahead and share the link to today's handout before people start going in the chat box. So everybody look really quickly. Nella's going to put in the chat box. There's a Google Doc. You'll have to download it. If you want to type on it right now, you'll have to make a copy and save it to your own drive. So if you go to, oops, oh, there it is. Yeah. So the handout for today is the tiny URL, July 8th. WLC, and then Terry put in the wild apricot for membership. So we got two things going on there. Okay, so the first thing is I'm going to switch over to a screen to share. What I want everybody to do is I want you to do a two words, no more than 2 words, about how you're feeling right now about the school year. I know a lot of districts have started rolling out their plans. There's a lot out there. So just throw in the chat box 2 words about how you're feeling about the upcoming school year. So you go ahead and do that while I find my screen to share. So I'm looking in the chat box and there's a lot of concerned, uncertain, apprehensively excited. I like that. Overwhelmed, stressed, nervous, tired. Yeah, I'm sure you are tired. So yeah, there's a lot. It's nervous, it's excited, it's innovative. Yeah, dark about the schedule. Yeah. So we look at it from the ODE side where every district is different. We're trying to support different ways. My son is still in high school, so we haven't heard from his school what they're doing. So there's a lot out there. I guess the good thing is little by little, once you at least know your plan, then at least it's easier maybe in theory to start planning. So you can see on my screen that this is the document that we're using today. And on every page, I've put the tiny URL. So if you just joined us, at the top of the page, if you type in that tiny URL, it'll get you to the Google Doc. So again, if you want to be able to type on it, you'll have to download or save your own copy. So this workshop is about universal design for learning, or designing to the edges. There's all sorts of names that we could call it. We could call it differentiation 2.0, differentiated learning. I've never been a fan of the phrase differentiated instruction, because then it makes it sound like it's all in the teacher who has to do everything. And then teachers are like, how am I supposed to, handle 30 kids with 30 different needs, et cetera. So I like differentiated learning, or design to the edges, or UDL. I put some references on here. These are where the research that I'm presenting from today comes from, but also some things that are sort of easier and like more in depth to get into. So the first 2, the UDL guidelines, the CAST website and the Novak Educational Consulting website, those are just fantastic websites with easy, practical, quick information about UDL, Universal Design for Learning, which you'll see, isn't really as complicated sometimes as it comes across. There's Corey Orlando's blog is pretty good. and the understood website, Understanding DL. So those first 4 are nice websites to go to if you're just like, I don't have a lot of time to read a book, but I need some information. They're very, very good. Katie Novak is actually the one who wrote the book UDL Now, and we did a book study at it at ODE, and it was just probably one of the best book studies I've ever done at ODE. So I highly recommend, if you have some time now before school starts, to take a look at that book. It's very practical. It's a very easy read. It's just a great book. The other one is The End of Average by Todd Rose, and I'm gonna show you a video from him today too a little bit. So, okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do, I don't know if you've ever used Mentimeter for doing polling. So what I want you to do is you can do this on your phone, you can do it on your computer, but I want you to go to menti.com, and I've got to find my screen here. I'm doing a lot of screen sharing today. Hang on, let me stop this share and get to the other one I want to share. Mentimeter, if you've never used it, is a really, hang on for a second. Is a really cool website for doing quick information, and it's free, which I really like. And you can always pay, but I found there's so much in the pay version, there's no reason to actually, so there's so much in the free version, there's no reason to pay. Okay, so I am going to, let me see here a second. Okay, so let me get my slide I want. Okay, so on your phone, if you go to menti.com, and then you should see at the top a code that you just type in 755853. That's all you got to do is type in that code, and then you'll see a question up there, and I want you to rate yourself on how much you already know about universal design for learning. And those of you who've gone to my in-person workshops, you know this rating that I do. So if you were looking at this from like a concert point of view, if you're a rock star, you're like, I could totally lead this session today, check second. If you're air guitar, like I use some UDL, but not consistently. Third, if you're like, I'm an audience member, I've heard of it, but I really don't know what it is. Or fourth, if you're in the parking lot and you're like, huh, what's UDL? I never even heard of this. We're trying to get another new acronym. So this Mentimeter, this is so cool because you can just do this. It's sort of like Padlet, but it's faster. Like it's easier to set up. It's easier for people to get to. Padlet sometimes can be a little bit tricky. So love Mentimeter, and there's tons of different types of questions you can do too. Okay. All right, so we see as results are coming in, a lot of people have heard about UDL but don't know what it is, use some piece of it not consistently. Quite a few people don't know what it is. Oh, we even got some rock stars. I could totally leave the session. Where were you when I was playing this? I could have used you. Okay, so let's let me get back to my screen, and I'm going to, yeah, okay. So we can sort of see where we are with this. Sorry about that. Yeah, so most people have either heard about it or used it a little bit, but not really positive about it, which is, I'm assuming, why you are here today. All right, so we are going to do a second question now. And hang on for a second. All right, and now here's my second question for you. So you might have to, I don't know if you have to refresh, or you might have gotten a thing that said new slide came up. And it says, what motivates you to come to the ODE OFLA virtual meetups? And this one is a word cloud. So you have a choice to put in up to 3 words. What motivates you to come to these meetups?
Kathy, while they are answering, I have a question. Do you
Yes.
know how similar or different Mentimeter is to poloeverywhere.com?
I have not used Poll Everywheres, but I'm assuming it's probably similar.
Okay.
But honestly, if anyone can put in the chat box, if you've used Poll Everywhere, what's the difference? All right, somebody just put in the chat box that it's similar. All right, so this is a cool feature too. So like the first one we did where you sort of just choose and you see that. This one's really cool because it gives a word cloud, and people can put in, like, you can choose how many words that they put in. I put 3 because I figured most people probably have at least three things going on. So what's motivating you come to our meetups? So we can see that knowledge is a big one, information, guidance, ideas. This would be really nice, if you're doing with students, and this is just great for getting formative assessments. So knowledge, learning, guidance, information, support, inspiration. Yeah, so really cool. So it's about, it looks like it's mostly people are like, I just need some ideas and knowledge about how do we do this. Perfect. All right. All right. So I am going to go ahead and get out of the Mentimeter now. And the good thing about Mentimeters, after you're done, like I can download all the results into a PDF, like this screenshot I would get in a PDF and stuff. And so that's pretty cool that you can do with that. Okay, I'm going to get back to our handout. If I can find it. Every time I go back to share, I have to, oops, sorry about that. That's not what I wanted to do. Where's my handout? There we go. All right, where am I? There we go. Okay, so that was it. So let's do a little bit of terminology today. And so the first thing that we're going to talk about is, actually I got a couple, I'm running two screens here, and so I'm trying to keep things all over. Okay, the first thing is, let's talk about the difference between backward design and UDL. So backward design is, if you know from McTeague and Wiggins, is it gives you a framework where you set the learning outcomes, you determine the evidence that shows they met the learning outcomes, and then you plan for those learning outcomes. And that's actually what we're going to focus on a little bit tomorrow and over the course of the next couple of weeks, is we're going to use the backward design framework. UDL, Universal Design for Learning, is actually, it's really interesting because it came from the architectural concept of universal design, which is basically, how do you make it, when you're designing buildings or spaces, how do you make the physical environment accessible to everybody by getting rid of barriers? Like, for example, if you make a ramp, that makes it accessible to everybody. So universal design for learning was developed from the same concept. And the idea is that you remove barriers in the learning environment. And so the main way to do it is the same thing that you do in a building or whatever, is that you prepare a learning environment where everybody has what they need to meet the goals in whatever way is necessary. So if there's a ramp and the stairs, I personally may not need the stairs, but somebody else may, or need the ramp, but someone else may need the ramp. So we can both get to the second floor. It doesn't matter how we get there, as long as we can get there. And so that's what we're trying to do, is you anticipate and you plan for the range of all your learners. And that's where that design to the edges comes from. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. I always thought this cartoon is a great cartoon, that there's, the guy shoveling the stairs for school, and there's the kid in the wheelchair, and he's like, can you shovel the ramp? And he's like, wait, I got to get the stairs done. And the kid's like, wait, but if you shovel the ramp, we can all get in. And that's exactly what it is. I know teachers already know this, that a lot of times when you provide some sort of support for a certain student or group of students in your class, you realize that everybody benefits from it. So if you're already like, I do stuff like that, that's universal design for learning. You're already actually doing stuff like that. Okay, so we're going to do a couple more things to do some prior knowledge. So we've talked about, just in best practices when you are, for instruction and learning, is that you have to know what your students, or in our case, our teachers, already know. What are their background experiences? And we're all familiar with that concept of I+1 in second language acquisition, where the I is the language that a student can understand and produce, and the +1 is the comprehensible input, where they can understand us, but they can't yet produce it. And that's always been a factor in all the professional learning I do, whether it's face-to-face. A lot of you have probably heard me say this before, that our professional learning, this summer series or anything you do, is always I+1. It's always, what do I already know and can do, and how can I bump it up just one little step above? So keep that whole second language acquisition, I+1, keep that in mind with our learning, because everybody, there's 118 people here, and everyone's at a different spot. So wherever you are, the whole goal is to bump it up a little bit. All right, so we are going to go back to menti.com, and you're going to have a new code this time. I got to stop sharing. I got to find a new screen. Hang on for a second here. Every time I stop sharing, I have to go back in and find my Menti screen. All right, hang on for a second. Right, there we go. All right, let me share my screen with you. Okay, this time what I want you to do, we're going to present here, and what I want you to do this one, and this one is just an open thing. I want you to think about work or community environment, and how we said about the universal design and architecture. And I want you to think of the environment, in the city or your community or in a building or wherever, that they have designed features that are supposed to be accessible for individuals with a disability, but they actually help all of us. Like we mentioned, ramps. So on this one, your code is 707648, and this is just an open box where just what are some features of the community, exactly like handrails. So things that are made for people with a disability, but actually end up helping everybody.
I'm sorry, I have a question. So we need to go again to the website, start again?
So go to menti.com and you'll just put in
Again,
a code.
from the beginning.
Yeah, but it's just, you just type it in and it comes up. Yeah. That's the one thing, and actually I'm glad you brought that up, Patricia, because that is the one thing about the free version of Mentimeter is that you can only do 2 questions and then you have to create a new presentation, which is why you have to go to a new code. I think in the paid version, you can add more than like 1 question. Like I could have had all the questions on 1 code if you want to pay, but I'm like, I like free stuff. So, but you can make as many of these 2-question presentations as you want. So Patricia, I'm glad you said that because that reminded me of that. Thank you. So the code is at the top of the screen. It's 707648. And so this version of Mentimeter, when people come up with ideas, you can see closed captions, lower drinking fountains, elevators, ramps, voice enables cash registers, automatic doors, lighted signs, exactly. All of that type of, all of those type of features help people with certain disabilities, but also help people who don't necessarily have a disability. They make it accessible for everyone, motion sensing mechanisms. And then I also wanted to just show you this Mentimeter tool. This is another one where people put in answers and it sort of scrolls as more and more people put in answers. Okay, so you can sort of see what we're doing with that one. Okay, so those are features. So this is, if you think of universal design for learning in the same way that you think of a building, I think it just makes it more, to make a pun, I guess, it makes it more accessible for all of us as teachers to realize, oh wait, okay, I get how they do it in a building. It's not as hard of a concept, you know, as it is in learning as maybe you thought it was. Okay, so I am going to escape out of that and we're gonna do one more question, same code. And this time, so just stay on that screen, same feature. This time, so you should have just had a new slide come up on your phone when I did this, is now I want you to think of the same thing. So we just did some universal design in buildings. Now what I want you to do is think of something in your classroom or your instruction where you intended it to meet the needs of certain students, but then you found that it helped like a lot of students or all the students. And so this is another way that you can have answers come up, and this time you physically scroll. So the one we did prior, like it scrolls automatically, and this is one where you can make it physically scroll. So if you want to go to a separate piece, you can. So as we're doing this, I'm trying to show you how the tool works as well as get some prior knowledge for you. Right, so take a look at this, and I'll save, I can download these responses, like I said, and I'll save all these, and when we post like the chat and all the information, this one I'll post, and that's why I had you put actual words in so we could share it. So yeah, different readers, support groups, signs, graphic organizers, retaking assessments, reading aloud, voice recording, visual signs, printing copies, chunking material, lots of visuals. I mean, yeah, these are fantastic ideas. So if you are already doing things like this, you're already doing universal design for learning. You're already doing UDL, which I find that in most of the sessions that we do, is that teachers a lot of times are like, wait, I'm already doing this. And it's like, yes, because language teachers are so innovative. There's so many things that we just do from instinct that you realize, wait, those are actually research-based. Okay. So like I said, I will save this for us and post it, but you can see there's a lot of things on here that you do for some kids, but they will benefit everyone. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and exit out of that. Okay, good. All right, we're back to the handout. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about design to the edges. So designing to the edges, there's a TED talk, which I'm not going to show because it's like 18 minutes long, which isn't long, but that would take a big chunk of our time today. But I highly, highly recommend that you go to YouTube, not now, but go to YouTube and watch this TED talk by Todd Rose called The End of Average. This is there's 2 YouTube videos I think that have changed my life. One is like Brene Brown's, if any of you are Brene Brown fans, her YouTube video. And then Todd Rose on The End of Average. And what he does is he talks about how it was in the 50s, and the Air Force was, they had a lot of fighter pilots who were crashing because they couldn't get the cockpit to fit everybody, because they just had a one size fits all average cockpit. So they did all the measurements of a bunch of different pilots, took the average and built a cockpit from that. And after they built the cockpit, they realized that the cockpit didn't fit anybody. So how it was supposed to fit the average person, it actually fit no one. And so then he talks about how education is the same, about how there's sort of, if you have one way of teaching to the average student, that there's no such thing as average, because nobody fits all the criteria that you're looking for at the exact same spot. So if you plan instruction for the average student, you actually are planning instruction for nobody. And that's the end of average. What I am going to show you right now is that Shelley Moore, and it's a 6-minute, her things are really cool. They're only 6 minutes long, and I've never played one of these on Zoom, so I'm hoping I can do this and get the sound to work. If not, I might just have to skip it. But Shelley Moore talks about his talk, and I really like hers because it's very straightforward. Now, someone help me, is there a feature if I'm screen sharing about picking sound? Someone who says, I thought someone said there was or something.
Yeah, when you go to screen share,
yeah,
there should be an option. I can't see it on mine, but there is an option where it says share computer sound, and you click on the bottom. On the screen share, you get a.
Oh, I got it.
I think, and it says, yeah.
Got it. Okay, so we're going to see if this works with Shelley. And if you can't hear it, let me know.
The two most common reasons people go to see plastic surgeons are undoubtedly wrinkles and laxity, otherwise known as sagging skin. But is surgery really the only solution?
Welcome to 5 More Minutes, helpful videos in 5 minutes or less that support the teaching and learning of all students. I'm your host, Shelley Moore, and this episode is The End of Average. Give a really big shout out to Todd Rose, because our episode is based around a story that he tells in his book, The End of Average. Go buy this book, go read this book. This book totally helped me understand not only my own tumultuous experience in school, but also my understanding of how to approach curriculum as a teacher. Because what I realized after reading this book is that the idea of should is a direct connection to the concept of average and our ongoing fight against the green. Todd Rose talks about average in the book and actually mentions it as being a very useful concept when comparing large groups of one dimension. Like, for example, if you're comparing the height of a Canadian and comparing that to the average height of an American, that's a great use of average. Big sample size, comparing one dimension. Education, however, isn't that simple. First of all, we're not comparing groups to each other. We're comparing individuals to a group. Second, those individuals that we're comparing are not one-dimensional. People are not just height. Not even paper is one-dimensional. To prove this point further, Todd Rose tells a story about airplanes. In the 1950s, fighter jet pilots, they weren't performing well, and some were even getting injured in their cockpits because they were getting jostled around a little bit. They weren't able to reach for the controls effectively to help them make those split-second decisions needed to operate a plane that's flying like at 1 billion miles an hour. Something just had to be done. So a very smart Air Force researcher went and found 4,000 pilots and took their measurements, the length of their arms and their legs, the width of their hips and their shoulders, 10 dimensions in total, to try and use that data to design a better cockpit for the pilots. Now, in the age of standardization, we could simply just average these measurements and design a perfectly standardized plane. Most people are average, right? Well, you tell me, how many of those 4,000 pilots do you think would fit into an average plane? Just give me a ballpark. 0, none, nada. Not one of those pilots could fit, because not one of those 4,000 pilots had the exact combination of all the measurements in every dimension. The average plane was being designed for a mythical green pilot. Now, another solution might be to use those measurements and design custom-made, individualized planes for every pilot. That would totally work. It just might not be the most cost-effective option, though. Okay, so what do? One individualized plane for every pilot won't work, and one standardized plane for all pilots also isn't working. Is there another option? Well, that very smart researcher realized the solution. It wasn't the average measurements of the dimensions that was needed to design the plane, it was the range of dimensions. Because using a range, the planes could become adjustable. How many pilots can fit into a plane that's adjustable? Every Every single one. It's the reason why we have adjustable seats in our cars, because you can't just chop off someone's legs if they're too tall. It's so messy. Okay, now let's think about this in terms of curriculum. For years and years and years, we have been struggling with exactly the same problem. We've been trying to fit students into a standardized curricular plane. The error, though, is in the assumption in both of these scenarios is that the plane or the curriculum is static and that it's the pilots and the students that are malleable. The reality is that no one actually fits. We have designed curriculum for mythical green students based on averages of multi-dimensional people. Now, just like a plane, it's not cost-effective or efficient to design individualized, custom-made curriculum for every individual student. But we're also realizing that it's also impossible to have one standardized curriculum for every individual student. It is quite the dilemma. But what if we approached it in the same way? What if we stopped looking at the average and instead started to look at the range of our learners? What are their dimensions? But not in terms of what's missing, but instead, what do they bring? What are their stories? What are their histories? Or as my good friend Leighton calls it, their funds of knowledge. How do we find out and use what our students bring in all of their dimensions and design a curriculum that's adjustable just for them? This type of curriculum would allow all students to be successful, every single one. But here's the kicker. In this part really got me. I was thinking about this one day and I was imagining a pilot like crawling into an adjustable plane. And I asked myself, who's making these adjustments? And then it hit me, the pilot. The pilot is making the adjustments. And then when I started thinking about my own students and I realized, wait a second, who's making the adjustments for them? It wasn't them, it was me. I was making the adjustments, the teacher. You know, we talk all the time about growth mindset and student agency, self-regulation of learning, and I realized that this is it. This is what we're talking about. How do we teach students to make the adjustments that they need so that they can fly the plane? We have been so focused on trying to get kids to fit into the plane that we've totally forgotten that fitting into the plane isn't even the goal. The goal is to fly it, to fly the plane. It's our job to teach them how to make the adjustments that they need. Once they figure that out, they can take that plane wherever they want. So this, my friends, is our job. How do we design an adjustable plane? How do we make curriculum responsive to our specific group of learners? There could be a billion answers to those questions. I'll leave you with this. What are you already doing? How are you already getting to know your learners, making adjustable curriculum, finding success for every single learner? This is the question I'll leave you with today. But then I'll say, are you ready to see the end of average?
Okay. Sorry, I gotta turn that off. Okay, for a second. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. I'm trying to negotiate this myself. All right. So go back to sharing here. Okay. Yeah, I watched her video, and as much as I love Ted Rose's talk, hers was just like 6 minutes of her just throwing that out there, and that whole thing about letting students be the ones who adjust it was just amazing. So let's go ahead and keep looking at the document here on the screen. So the biggest thing that she talked about was that the variabilities, like the factors that they talked about, how when they were measuring the pilots, they did the legs and the hips and everything like that. And the same thing applies when you look at Todd Rose's full TED Talk. And what Shelley just said also is that there's no such thing as an average student. Everybody has different strengths, different weaknesses, different variabilities. Okay, so we're going to scroll down to the next page. So if you're in the handout, I'm on to page 3. So this is where this is why the differentiated instruction was always such a term that sort of stuck, I didn't like, and I couldn't figure out why. And it gets down to, because differentiated instruction is that you plan various levels of activities based on the perceived abilities or labels of your students, which was her thing about you build every kid their own plane that fits their specific needs. And I think that's why as soon as people mention differentiated instruction, as teachers, the first thing we do is like, oh my gosh, I got 30 kids in a class. How am I supposed to develop all of those needs? So again, which is why people are like, but when we go to UDL, the difference is that we plan the learning experiences that eliminate barriers for all students And they choose how to access the material, engage with it, and show what they know. So we're doing exactly what she said, where we build flexible cockpits and help the students learn how to make the adjustments. What we're trying to do is we really want to build autonomous learning. We want to make kids basically their own, like learn how to teach themselves, sort of. Here's a little cartoon for a little T-Rex, if you want to take a look at that. A little lightness there. Okay, so this is what I want you to do in the chat box. And I'm doing it in the chat box because I want to everyone to be able to save it, and I want to have easy access to it. So that's why I'm not doing it in Mentimeter. So this is what I want you to do. And Nella, I'm going to have you help me out with this. So in the chat box, so the first thing they talked about is how the Air Force made flexible cockpits based on 10 variabilities, like height, leg, arm length, etc. So this is what I want you to put into the chat box, is I want you to think about what are some typical variabilities that we often see in students who are learning a new language. And this could be with remote learning also. For example, there's things like a lot of kids are going to have, are they ready? You know, how close are they to the learning goal? What's their interest level? What's their passion level? All sorts of factors. So what I want you to do is start typing in the chat box all the things that we already know are things that we have to address. And Nella, your job is to go through the chat box and start giving me some of the terms you see, and I'm going to start typing some of them into the document also. And I'm sort of looking too. Is Nella on here? Is she hearing me? Nella, are you on here? Or does Ryan, do you want to jump on? Does someone want to?
I am here trying to go, yes, but you're putting the ones I'm going for.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah.
Attention span. Huh.
Am I getting, I'm just sort of, I'm looking on my.
Yeah, somehow I can't type.
All you have to do is say them to me and I'll type them in.
Attention span.
Okay, yeah, that's all I want you to do is just read them off for me.
Okay. Reading skills, diverse interests, visual learning.
Yeah, you can keep going.
Collaboration skills.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
Self-confidence. Emotional intelligence.
Yeah, I'll just put SEL for that. Yeah. What else is going on? I know there's a lot of
kid or computer.
What was that one?
Processing speed of the kid or computer.
Oh yeah, exactly.
A child needs to be able to see, hear, understand subject matter. Anxiety.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Work ethic. Pair help. Ooh, perfection.
What was that one?
Pair help.
Pair, like
Pair.
Oh,
I'm guessing it's working together.
Oh, working in. Oh, I see. Okay.
Work
ethic, you said.
Then I have perfectionism. Realistic personal goals.
Okay. All right. So we sort of get the idea on this. And don't forget that you can save the chat box too. If you just, where you type in your answer, those 3 dots, you can save the chat box yourself also too. Okay, so I just wanted to get that. So this is the point that I had you do this, is that when we're doing this, trying to plan for a range of learners, we already know a lot about our students, okay? So when you're doing universal design for learning and trying to plan a lot of different ways for kids to learn, it's not like you're starting from scratch and have to figure out 30 different things. Everybody has different needs. There are some, especially if you're an experienced teacher, or even if you've just had 1 year of experience, there are just typical things that are going to happen in the classroom with learners that we can know ahead of time, and sort of when we're planning our learning experiences and planning those variabilities, we already know. So they'll work in any scenario. So that's sort of that was sort of like a relief thing that hit me as I was going through and researching all this, was that like, wait a minute, we already know a lot of the things that we have to plan for, so let's embed those. Okay. Oh, risk taker, I like that one. Especially in a language class, risk taking is huge. Okay, so let's go, we're just moving on here. So again, save that chat because there's some great, yeah, you got food, you got all those other things going in there. Okay, So the next question we have then is, how do we learn the range of our students' variabilities and needs in order to plan? So, the Air Force surveyed, or took measurements of 4,000 pilots. Obviously, we're not going to do that for every single kid. But what we want to think about is, oops, my screen's a little bit off. Oh, I see why, because I typed in there. Okay. So think about how we start to learn about our students. And you can do this whether we're face-to-face, remote, hybrid, with tech, without tech, synchronous, asynchronous, ways that we get to know our students. So a lot of things, I just threw some things down here. Like we do surveys, we do polls, you can do questionnaires. A random biography, Caitlin Tucker talked about that, where you just have kids, just write 10 random things about you and turn it into me that you want me to know. We do community building activities, and we find out a lot about kids' needs with those sort of academic type things. We do a pre-assessment of their current level with a little bit of, okay, I'm going to give a novice mid-ish type assessment, but with room for that I could see novice low or novice high or whatever. We can ask previous or current teachers. We can look at their standardized tests, for example, for ELA. So there's lots of different ways to get to know our students' variabilities. The red question, you don't have to necessarily put this in the chat box, but it's just sort of more of a personal question, is I want you to, or you can put it in the chat box, actually, it's nice to share. Just what are you going to do at the beginning of this school year? And some of you know where you're starting. Some of you like, we're all remote. Other people like, we don't know or whatever. What are you going to do at the beginning of the year to learn about your students? Just go ahead if you want to throw something in the chat box, or if you just want to internally think about that. But so that's sort of the first question. There's no point in starting to teach if we don't know our students and their needs. So what are you going to do at the beginning of the year to learn about your kids? Google Form, perfect. Google Forms are great. Look up English and social studies grades, surveys, Google survey, games, teachers, journal in the target language, short answer questions, review assessment data, and someone I think it's already gone through, I can't see it anymore. Go to their events. Hopefully we have some. Exactly, go to their events, find out what they like. Is that this year, especially given how crazy the spring was, if we don't know where our students are when they come in, we have to know. You can't just make that typical assumption that a lot of times you usually have. I love the 3 truths and a lie. I do that with my ESL students about the 3 truths and a lie. What'd you do this summer? Exactly. So great ideas in the chat box. So that's the first thing you have to have in mind, is when I go in there that first day of school, wherever we are, or that first week, what am I going to do to learn about my students? Okay, so let's talk about UDL now. So we're sort of got all this talk, but we haven't actually touched on UDL. But you'll see that we basically have already hit it. So if you look at my handout here, so universal design for learning is simply that we have goals, assessments, methods, and instruction that work for everybody. Okay, and there's a link on here where I got this image from, so you're free to go to that. It's one of the references I put up top. But basically, UDL focuses on 3 parts of the brain. It focuses on the why of learning, so the engagement. So if we want to have purposeful, motivated learners, we have to stimulate an interest and a motivation in them for learning. It's sort of, remember way back in the beginning of this session where I said, why do you come to these meetups? That's what I was doing, is I was trying to get what's the interest in these meetups? Why is everybody coming? The second part of UDL is the what of learning, and that's the purple part of the brain. And that's where, if we want to have resourceful, knowledgeable learners, that we present the information in a variety of different ways, okay? Which, when we talked about some of those things on there, when you had the question about what did you find that you do for one learner that helps other learners, okay? So we present things a lot of different ways. And then the third piece of the brain, the blue part of the brain, is the how of learning. And that's for the students. If we want them to be strategic and goal-directed, we give them a variety of ways that they can express what they know. I think those of you who have seen about with the choice boards and all of that we've been doing, that's sort of where that's coming from, that there's not one set way to express what you know. So we want to allow that a little bit more. I'm not going to go to this link underneath it, this infographic, but Kim Novak, the one who wrote the who wrote the book, on her website, she actually breaks this down into some examples. So after the session, if you want to go in there and look, you can get a little bit more on that. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you an idea of UDL in action, which was basically what's been going on as we've been planning this ODE and OFLA virtual summer series, okay? Because a lot of times the PD we do is, all of us at OFLA and at ODE, we do our PD live, and it's just like with teaching, it's a lot easier to do a professional learning when you're live, because you got the people there and you got the interaction and community builds. So when we started doing these virtual meetups, it's literally sort of the same process that you're going to be going through this fall, about how do I take something that I'm, know so well how to do in person, how do I switch that around and do that now in a virtual environment? So we're going to look at the different pieces that we've talked about. So for example, for us to do the summer series, the first thing here in pink is, and this isn't on the 3 brain things, this was some of the prior knowledge, is we had to know what are our teachers' needs and variabilities. So I'm not going to, I'll give you just take 20 seconds and just sort of skim through what we did to find out what teachers need. I'll give you about 20 seconds to do that.
I do have a quick question here from Lonnie.
Yeah.
Says it's long, so listen. How are we as parents should deal with the types of interventions needed with less talk and more adjustments to teach different students towards access to more resources, not falling off the cliff into the scoring game?
Lonnie, I'm going to apologize, but could you rephrase your question? Because I'm not quite sure what you're asking. I have to be honest. There's a lot in there. I see 3 or 4 different things. Could you maybe make it a little bit more? I'm sorry. I'm not quite clear what you're asking.
Or Lonnie, maybe you want to share and ask the question directly.
Okay, why don't you type it back in there, Lonnie, because if we're going at it from the parent's point of view, that's a different thing than what we're doing from the teacher point of view. So I don't want to ignore your question. So go ahead, if you could sort of rephrase it for me in the chat box, and we'll get back to it, Nella. Okay, so that was the first thing we had to do to get to know our teachers. Now let's go into the actual brain parts of UDL. So the engagement piece. So it's, like I said, it's easy to engage teachers when we're there live. But what are we going to do to engage teachers in these meetups? So go ahead and take about 15 seconds and scroll through different things that we can, that we're doing to try to keep teachers engaged in our meetups. Okay, so the next part of UDL, if you remember up here, is the representation about presenting information in different ways. So go ahead and we'll just continue on there. So looking at this box right here in the purple, what are ways with these summer series and these virtual meetups that we have tried to present information in different ways for teachers to access it? Let's take about 20 seconds to read that. Okay, and then the last section, which was the blue part, which was giving different ways to express it, which is a little bit tougher with the teachers because we're sort of, right now, we don't have you in class, but there were a few things that we tried to have to allow teachers to express what they know. So just go ahead and take a look at those. We got sort of some stuff currently and some stuff that we have planned for the future. The third one, especially, we're really thinking that once everybody gets in there and sort of has some room to breathe and figure this out, come a little bit later into the fall, we'll start doing some meetups where it's not ODE and OFLA doing all the talking, but it's teachers saying, hey, this is what's happening in my classroom. Okay, so the reason I was showing you that is I wanted to, like I said, just give you a concrete example of how UDL has worked with our summer series, which is not quite the same as a classroom, but very similar. Okay. So as long as we sort of kept these types of things in mind as we're planning our series, we hopefully are addressing as many learners as possible. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about, and then we're going to actually go into breakout rooms, is I want to talk about multi-tiered activities and support when you're doing this designing to the edges. Okay, and so there's research, if you have ever read the book or seen the book, Integrated Multi-Tiered System Support, where they talk about tier 1, 2, and 3 different levels of activities and support that we provide to learners. So tier 1 support is support that's put in place for everybody in the class, sort of like all those ideas you were sharing before about what are you going to do, in the class that helps all the kids. So we look at the variabilities like that we just talked about that we see in language learners, like, motivation and interest and nutritional needs and all those things that we put up in that box up above, plus any information you've learned about your students from, community building, the first day of school, etc. So the goal is the more you know about all your students and the range of, the edges of what they need, the more of this tier 1 support you can give, the better the students are going to exceed. They're going to do better with achievement, and they're going to have better behavior. So the goal is the more you know about your students, the more of that general tier 1 support you can give, where you're not trying to come up with individual things for every individual student. Tier 2 support is support that's used in addition to, and so not instead of, but in addition to tier 1, and that's for individual student needs. So for example, like some of you put, some students have, perhaps a hearing or a seeing difference, and so you had to address that. That may be something that does or doesn't help everyone. So tier 1 is where we do everything that the strategies we use to address the edges of everyone in the class. Tier 2 is a little bit of additional support that we provide to those students who need it based on individual needs. But notice, the research shows the more tier 1 support you use, the less tier 2 support that you're going to need. Tier 3 support really moves beyond the classroom. That's when you have students who need specialized help, either from the Title I teacher or the intervention specialist or the IEP team. So tier 1 and 2 we can address in our class. Tier 3 is where it really moves out of what we can do as a teacher. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna do some Zoom breakout rooms here, and looking at my clock, I think I can give you maybe about 8 minutes in the breakout rooms. I'm hoping this is gonna work okay. So what you're gonna do when you go into your breakout room, and I'm just gonna do random ones, and the screen sharing is enabled if you wanna share your screen, if someone wants to share this grid that we're gonna look at. If you wanna just talk, that's okay too. So this is what I want you to do when you go into your breakout room. As I want you to think about the variabilities or the typical needs that we spoke about earlier that language learners have. In your breakout room, I want you to brainstorm or share tier 1 activities that you use that will hit a large range of students, including, especially knowing with the remote and hybrid thing coming up, about needs that can address all the kids. So, and remember, the thing to keep in mind is a lot of this is going to overlap and integrate and be dynamic. So it's not like there's only one thing to do. So when you get in there in your breakout room, I want you to look at 2 different things. Across the top is where we sort of hit the standard. So we have that whole cultural, social, emotional, remote learning needs. We're going to focus on literacy, the 3 modes and the 4 skills. On the left-hand side, you have the 3 components of UDL. So how am I going to stimulate interest in my kids across these areas across the top? How am I going to provide multiple ways for students to access material in the various categories? And how am I going to let kids have different ways to show what they know? So when you go into your breakout room, it's not like you have to go in any sort of order. What I really want you to do is just go in there, and for about, like I said, maybe about 6 or 7, maybe 8 minutes, I want you to share what are things you're already doing, some tier 1 support that would go into this. If you're like, I don't like the grid, I just want to share ideas, that's okay too. Okay, so I'm going to put you into breakout rooms here for about 8 minutes, and I want you to talk about what are some tier 1 support that you are already doing. So I'm going to stop share.
I have a question,
Yes.
Kathy. I'm not sure what is a breakout room.
I'm going to put
what
you
you're talking about.
It's a small group that you're going to go into automatically. So I'm going to click the button here, and you're going to be in a group with like 10 people. And I want you to just share in a small group ideas that you're doing that hit all of your learners.
Oh, okay.
So that it's another feature of Zoom. So what I'm trying to do with this is show you different features as we go through also. All right, so I'm going to put you, there's going to be about 10 people in your room, and actually I'll make it a little bit higher. There's going to be about 9 or 10 people. I'm going to put you into the room for about 7 or 8 minutes and just share ideas that you're going to be able to do across tier 1 activities that will address all your students. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I believe you have to click, you might have to click you have to click join to go into the breakout room. You should have a join button on your screen. Click that, and then you should go into your room.
Just a join breakout room and you click it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kathy, I'm waiting here with you because Lonnie actually reposted the question. So I just wanted you to take a
Oh,
look.
let me take a look at
later.
his.
Yeah, so it says, how our parents should deal with the types of intervention needed for slow learners. Do you see it?
We feel that instructional classroom instruction can evolve and focus on advanced words. Oh, well, that's exactly, Lonnie. That's exactly what this is all about. Is Lonnie still here?
I don't think the person is here, but
Okay.
I think Lonnie he's in a breakout room, but I just want to make sure that you know it. So
okay, so he's asking from the parent side, how do we? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to a breakout room. Somebody had a question about how to record in the breakout rooms, and as far as I understand, unless you go there, it doesn't get recorded.
Yeah, but we're going to share some ideas afterwards.
Okay, perfect. All right, see you later.
Okay.
Have to sit back down in their chair. However, one of their shipmates can save them if they answer whatever was wrong.
If you just joined and you're not in a breakout room, you should have a button on your screen that says join. We're just doing small groups where people are sharing some ideas about activities they do that help all the kids. So if you see a join pop up on your screen, just click that and you'll go into one of the small groups.
Does anyone have anything else that they want to contribute in terms of Tier 1 activities?
I think for me, I'm just still trying to get the understanding.
I know the one disadvantage of when you go into a breakout room is you can't record. So I know that that was an issue. So hopefully you were able to take some notes. What I want to do now is I want to just do one more Mentimeter.com, where you go back into the Mentimeter. And I want you, oops, I'm trying to get to there from there. And this is what I want you to do. Oops, let me get back in here. And I want to just get some feedback on just your thoughts on UDL right now, because the thing is, today was sort of the overview of what is UDL and how do we start thinking about it. And as we go through the remaining sessions for this summer, where we're going to actually get into the nitty gritty about, okay, when I'm using UDL and when I'm doing this in my classroom, what is it actually going to look like? So today was just sort of the overview of what is UDL and to get your brain thinking about it. So what I want you to do is go ahead and go to Mentimeter, or to go to menti.com, type the code 396369. Oh, because you didn't have, no one in the room had the document pulled up? Okay. Okay, that would be an issue. Okay, so something to keep in mind if we do the breakout rooms. Okay, so just go into the Mentimeter now, into your phone, go to menti.com and type 396369. And just based either on the breakout room discussions or what we've been doing today with UDL and some of the examples and the videos we watched, just what are your initial thoughts or comments or questions about UDL, about Universal Design for Learning? So go ahead and put those in the Menti. Yeah, thanks. So then a lot of, it's a lot of going on, a lot of discussions about your breakout room. So some people are like, oh my gosh, we had the best discussion. Other people are like, we didn't have the handout, so we didn't know what to talk about. Other ones were like, nobody said anything. So yeah, it's kind of fun, I guess, to experience maybe what happens when your kids get into into a breakout room. Okay, so I'm going to take a look here at some of these to see. Okay, so need a lot more instruction and resources, right, which we're going to be doing as the sessions you'll see over the next couple of weeks are really getting into like the different modes and the different, types of resources, et cetera. Language acquisition, need to learn more. How do we get more training? Are you doing it? Breakout was not successful. Okay, so definitely something to if you're going to use them, to definitely practice to make sure it works. Representation gets tricky without internet, right? Which we're actually going to talk about that tomorrow too. And that's some of the things to talk about. All students can participate. UDL in a blended environment, yeah. Most people seem to have a good idea of the tier 1 support, so that's good. Fits well with PBL. Can do some more. How can we establish a real relationship if we're only working with them virtually, right? And that's a good comment. We're going to talk a little bit about that as we go through our presentations the next week, and then we're actually going to have one that's called Building Community with Students. So that's going to be another one that we're going to focus on, because it's tricky. It's tricky. It's inherent in foreign language, UDL is. Yeah, have the learners have a little bit more in charge of it. Having templates and examples would be useful. Okay, sometimes students don't actually know how to help themselves, right? And so that one, if students don't know how to help themselves or know what they need, again, that's not the student's fault. That's where we have to adjust the environment to make sure that they do know what they need and how to help themselves. So again, that's what UDL is. If you know this is an issue that they don't know how to help themselves, then we think as a teacher, okay, what can I do to help them do that? Still need some more information, need to learn more. Need to have more workshops based solely on UDL. Yeah, like I said, we did the book study and we spent, I think, 12 weeks at ODE working on UDL. So to try and do it in a 75-minute session is a little bit tough, but I at least wanted you to get the broad feel of what UDL is about. How do we do it, including everybody? Isn't it too general? Okay, so let's take a look. I'm a Montessori teacher. Let's do that. Gives kids a break. How do we get more training? Right. Okay, this would be nice to see if we could get an actual series of someone to come in and do it. Okay, got like 5 minutes. Okay, you still have to build community. Exactly, you have to build that rapport for UDL to be successful, and that gets back to that. How do I get to know my students in the first week? How do I build those relationships? That's a great one. I need to do more scaffolding. I really wish the resources were handed out ahead of time. I need to process and really need the information and look at visuals beforehand. I'll be honest, I don't always have them ready beforehand. Sometimes they're ready the night before. So unfortunately, I'm just going to be very frank with you, given with how many of these we're doing, I don't always have the resources far enough in advance to give them. I'm going to be honest with you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get out of that. And like I said, I will save all of these and put these into the chat box in the notes that we do. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that for a second. All right, I'm going to get one more thing. Hang on a second here. I've lost my screen. Hang on for a second. I'm trying to get out of my Mentimeter and I can't get out of it. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, I want to look at one more thing on the document. Let me share my screen here. Okay, so the next thing is to think about when we're talking about UDL, because a lot of you are like, okay, but I need more training. I need to think about what's next. And so like I said, we're going to do a lot of this over the course of the next few weeks as we get into some more of that actual discrete planning. What's it going to look like in my classroom? There's three things that I'd like you to think about. And if you want to go back, like I said, I gave you those different blogs, those different resources. Those of you who said, I really want some more training on this. If you go back to those initial references I gave you, again, the first two, the CAST website and the Novak website are the two best ones that really just give a lot of concrete information. So if you're like, I just need a little bit more in-depth knowledge, go to those websites. If you have time to read a book, Katie Novak's book, UDL Now, is probably my best recommendation for doing this. But there's three things now to think about for the next steps as we're starting to move into planning actually for the fall when you're doing UDL. And so the first thing to think about is, number one, what are your must-dos for content and skills? And we sort of talked about this if you came to that workshop on the broader questions, is that we need to start thinking about, what do I actually have to teach? What's the important stuff to focus on this year? Because this year, most likely, there is not going to be time to do a full curriculum from the previous years. Because as you know already, even just looking at our website today, what we did today, everything takes longer when it's done virtually. So the first thing, the next step, and again, you can change this or personalize for yourself, but the next three steps that logically could happen is to look at the state standards and start outlining what's the priority content and skills that I really need to focus on the first semester. Even the year might be too much because things could change, but really think about, okay, what's the intercultural knowledge? What are the proficiency skills? What's the literacy? What's the social emotional? What's the technology? What are the big things that I'm going to focus on? Remember in the other one we did where it was pick 5 technologies you're going to use and stick with those to not overdo it. So that's the first thing, is really start as you're looking at, what am I going to teach the first week? What am I going to do in my first unit? Make a priority about what am I going to really cover this year, because I am not going to have enough time to do everything I normally do. The second step is to really start making a roadmap of your first unit. But really, and we've been going to a lot of Caitlin Tucker, who I mentioned in another website, who's really good on the blended learning, and just start doing a broad outline of the first unit. But she recommended, and I sort of agree with this, is that normally we have units that might take 6-8 weeks, which is fine to do when we're live. But it might be a good idea to break up your unit into like 3 or 4 week mini units within it, because that way it makes it easier for the time and the content to be more manageable for students and for the teacher. And so when you're designing your unit, and we're going to backward design, we're going to hit tomorrow, but there's a link to the process on there, sort of a quick description. But really think about, okay, my first unit that I'm going to teach when I go back in the fall, or my mini unit, what's the broad outline of what I'm going to do? What am I going to cover in this unit? And then once you sort of have the idea of what you're going to cover, start labeling it, because this is what's going to be difficult with the live versus the remote learning, is face-to-face time is going to be limited. If hopefully if we even have, it's going to go back and forth. So what you need to do is, or not need to do, but what I suggest you do is, as you plan your mini unit, start labeling different parts of it. If it's something that you're like, this is a priority, I really need to do this live with the students in the classroom or live on a video conference, label that with an L. If it's something that you're like, you know what, they can do it on their own, they can do it outside of class, they can sort of like someone said, hey, can you give me the stuff ahead of time? That same type thing. Label that part O, because in addition to figuring out what you're going to teach, it really is going to be imperative that you prioritize how am I going to maximize my time with the students? So that's my second suggestion for what to do. After you sort of do the broad, number one, what am I going to cover this semester? What's the big stuff I have to cover? Start planning out your first mini unit, like the first 3 to 4 weeks of school, and label, what am I going to do live, or if it's a Zoom call where we're all together, and what am I going to have the kids do on their own, and label that O. Then the third step.
Kathy.
Oh, yes.
Sorry for the interruption. Somebody wants to know again the name of the person, the resource for the Step 2 road. You mentioned Peyton.
It's Catlin. Sorry, it's Catlin. It's
Catlin Tucker. Okay.
Catlin Tucker, Catlan. I think in the one from, I forget when, last week we did, but if you just go to Catlin Tucker and Google Catlin Tucker blended learning, the woman's amazing. She's in California. She has a fantastic website. She has great ideas. So I highly, highly recommend going to her website. Okay, so after you figured out what's the big stuff I'm going to cover, at least for the semester, start planning out a 3 to 4 week mini unit. Unit 1, what am I going to do when I get back? Label what's my priority for live, what's my priority for what kids can do on their own, and then start looking at that UDL, whether you go back up to the grid or you look at, you know, your ideas for Tier 1 activities. So now, after you've sort of planned your Unit 1 mini unit, I'm sorry, your mini unit, look at the content in the skills that you're going to cover in that first 3 to 4 weeks and start thinking about, how am I going to do this to reach all the students? How am I going to engage a range of students? How am I going to present information in a variety of ways? And how am I going to let the kids represent their knowledge or demonstrate what they know in a range of ways? Okay. So that's just sort of a, it's not homework, but if you're like, I don't know where to go next, this is my recommendation for where to go next. Figure out what are the must-dos for the, first semester or the year or whatever. Make a roadmap of a mini unit with what's live and what can the kids do independently, and then start talking about designing to the edges. How am I going to hit the range of the students in my class? And again, you don't know your students yet, but we did those variabilities up above where every student has similar things in a language class that they struggle with. So what are some things I can start doing? Let me get back to that page. What are some things I can start doing to plan for, or was that kids who have motivation issues, or kids who struggle with pronunciation, or kids who don't know how to collaborate? Like, again, if you're like, I want to do small groups in Zoom, but I know my kids won't be able to do it, do a Zoom class do it in class with them on Zoom to practice, where it's not like anything school related. All right, we only have about 5 minutes. And again, I know this is sort of a big overview for a huge topic, but again, it's one of those things where we try to provide you with the basis of the knowledge to sort of get an idea of what it is, and then give you resources to sort of become that self-learner or self-teacher and say, okay, what am I going to do with this? How is this going to fit in? Nella, are there questions in the chat box that I need to take? I'll do Lonnie's separately because that's a parent question.
Not at the moment. I think we have addressed everything.
Okay, good.
I do have a question, so I don't know if you can answer.
Okay, Patricia, yeah.
Well, my question is this. I mean, we know how the kids are going to attend school this school year.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how do we teachers are going to, if we're going to be in the school, in the classroom with the student. What I read from they sent is that students are going to see only one teacher for the whole day or whole week. How foreign language teacher are going to attend school? That's what I don't understand yet.
Those are district decisions. That's every building has their own plan. I notice I see like Columbus Public put out a plan, Akron did, Hilliard just put out a plan. So I think during July, your district is going to tell you how they're going to do it. It's not a state decision. The only thing that came down from the state was that teachers and adults have to wear masks. So that was, I think, was really the only mandate. And then like the social distancing and safety protocol. But yeah, that's unfortunately, that's up to you.
Yeah, I mean, I just cannot figure it out how all this is going to work for us. I understand from the students, but I don't understand
and that's
how we are going to
Right, and that's the big question, and that's that uncertainty. That so it's sort of trying to like let's control all the things we can, like how am I going to do instruction in different scenarios. So at least that piece of it, it may not be perfect, but you at least have an idea in your head. But once you get in there, that's why we're going to do some follow-up stuff after everybody gets back and say, okay, this is what we thought it would be like. This is what it's really like. How are we going to do this? Now, are there other questions? I see some other, or are we good?
No, they're just asking technical questions as if the video will be posted for people to share or to see it later.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get it up in a couple days. Okay, well, it is 12:15 and I want to be respectful, or 12:13. So, like I said, UDL is a big concept, but it's also something that a lot of us are doing. So look at those resources, look at the websites, and just sort of go with that. And like I said, as we go into the future meetups, we're going to be doing, taking this whole mindset and doing more like, what do we do with the tomorrow's about assessment. We're going to talk about that. Okay, good, thank you. Okay, I feel like there's some questions in there. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Totally, yeah. And I just posted the link again for the certificate, the recordings and notes coming up soon. So you should be able to see them there.
Yeah, Doreen, go ahead if you want to share, since we're sort of done with the session. Doreen, you had a question about how to prioritize live Zoom versus independent. Because Zoom, Doreen, did you want to turn on your mic and share maybe?
Hi,
okay.
I wanted to ask a question because I am not sure, you know how homework is always perceived by the students as an overload. So
Right.
with the independent, the sum of independent that we would be having to do with the students, I am struggling with how to decide which one has to be live teacher students versus which ones should be students only focused to do independently. And how do we sell that? How do we sell that to the students? As that's like
I don't think it's more of selling it as much as sort of the way you present the information. But for example, like if I were in the classroom teaching with the high school kids, like I'm thinking of the ESL students that I teach, to me, the priority is if I'm presenting something that is brand new and complex that I know they might struggle with on their own, I'm going to do it live, either face-to-face or I'm going to do it in a live Zoom session. If I want to do interaction with the language, using the target language with the students, I'm doing that live because we need that. Things that I would put that they could do independently could be, like, for example, I forget whoever posted about, can you post the handouts for these sessions in advance, which I don't have done, but it's stuff like that. I could make a video and the handout and have the students part of their work. And, of course, there's always getting them to do it, but they look at the work ahead of time. They look at the handouts, they watch the videos. If it's a reading or a video or something that they can do an interpretive, that they don't necessarily need me there with them to do it, that's what I would have them do on their own. And so that's really, as you're planning each thing of what you do, think about, is this something the students could do on their own without me? So maybe they watch the video and do some comprehension questions on their own, but then we come together and we actually work with the information and we share some information and I take questions and we have conversations about it, and they go into breakout rooms, or we do a flip grid, or we share ideas or something. So that's it, and it really is sort of an art, and it really depends on what you teach and what you're teaching and how you do it. But really think to yourself, do the kids really need me to do the first part of this, or can they do some background on their own? And then when we come together is where we'll go more deeply.
Kathy,
I have another question.
If I could just add to that real quickly, when you're thinking about those assignments that you're going to have your students working on at home alone, two things are absolutely critical. One, is that assignment engaging? Does it tap into their interests? Is it something that they're going to be motivated to do? And second, is it relevant? Can they see why they need to do it? Do they understand how doing that activity, whatever it might be, is going to be useful to them someday when they go out and use this language somewhere?
Did you have another question, Doreen? I thought you were going to.
Yeah, my other question is, I faced that with my college students, and there was never a time where everyone in the class did their pre or whatever independent schoolwork before the Zoom session. And when I prepared my Zoom session, it was always based on the fact that that was a given, that they would prepare whatever is prepared, and then I carry on with only the interaction part. But then I faced a problem because not all of them did it. Then I had to do some presentation of that concept, and that took a lot of time. And when the Zoom meetings take long, the students were not very happy with that.
Right, and that's
So
a waste
that's
of
another struggle.
yeah, and that's a waste of your time. And so then again, that gets down to, and there's no easy answer for that, because that's
Right.
that's one of those variabilities that everybody faces.
Right.
Is, are the kids actually prepping for it? I don't have a ready one blurb answer for you. Part of it may be that interest piece. Is it something that they're actually interested in? I'm not saying that is or isn't the piece, but I think there's a lot that could go into it that we could probably have long conversations about that.
Okay. I just wondered if there is any other in the group that had some techniques or some motivational strategies.
Anybody else?
I get the relevance part, but not what's relevant is always relevant to the student. You know what I'm saying?
Right, and that's where you get that sort of choicing. Anyone else who's still on here, any suggestions for that?
I would love suggestions from others who practiced already that or faced the same problem.
My school is basically everybody, like that's what we're all told. We have been told that that's what we're going to do, basically a flipped classroom. And when you think about it, that's really for language, it kind of works out like really perfect. They have to do their like homework, quote unquote homework, to be able to participate in the class. They're going to be held accountable to participate in the class. I am a new teacher, like, so I'm not an expert, but when I thought about it, like I've always wanted to do that, but because we originally were told that not to give homework and not to give them things to do outside the classroom, it was shunned upon. Whereas now, because of COVID, basically that's where we're going, where they have to do their background and they have to come to class prepared. I think eventually, once they realize that they must be prepared to participate because they're going to be held accountable, like I'm already thinking ahead of how they will have to be held accountable for participating, and they won't be able to participate unless they do their quote unquote background homework. Let's call it homework for now. But I think that, I don't know, I just think that that's how it's going to work, where they're going to realize that they have to be prepared.
And I think the thing, I read this somewhere in all this research, and I agree with it, is that what kids did live in the classroom is probably going to be the same thing they do outside of the classroom. So if kids weren't doing their homework when you were face to face, they're probably not doing the homework when they go there. So it's not like it's something that if it was an issue with the kid live, it's probably still going to be an issue with the kid remote. I do think that you just made a good point. Who was that?
Heidi's fine, don't worry.
Heidi, okay, sorry. Heidi, that this fall is going to be different from the spring because there is accountability, there are grades, and if the kid can't participate and they're supposed to, a couple failing grades may be all the motivation that they need. So yeah, I think that's actually, keep that in mind, Doreen, and maybe shoot me an email and say, hey, can we do a follow-up session on this in September when we're actually
Yes,
a good idea.
Doreen, well, my concern was that some of my students actually failed because of that, because the other ones who prepared were ready and we moved on, because I couldn't do the back paddling.
No, and you shouldn't, yeah.
They ended up, and with the universal design, that shouldn't, I mean, we prepared for them to kind of give them choices and prepare like in different ways and everything, but then it came the part where their part is not done. And then we had to move on, and they ended up falling off the basket. And that's why I am asking others if there is any way we can save those kids from failing and from convincing them to do the right thing in these circumstances, you know?
I think
now it will be heavy on independent versus interactive. With the teacher, should be just interactive if we are still focusing on the teacher-centered classroom and not go back to the student on the student centered and not the teacher centered.
I think the other thing to think about is if you have students who are consistently not doing the work, it's going to have to be a one-on-one, and just ask them, why aren't you prepared? Because you may find out that there's a kid who's like, I'm taking care of my family and I don't have any time to do my homework. Or, you know, if you said you're teaching college kids, they could be like, I have 2 children and I don't have time to do it. If it's someone that is consistently someone who's not doing their work, I would talk to them one-on-one and actually say what's going on, because there may be an issue that you're trying to figure out that you don't even know what's going on. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that
No,
would
my
probably be the
concern is
first step.
going to the high schoolers in the fall, because I didn't do that with the fall with the high school students. So I was wondering, how is that
Kayla.
going to play out?
Yeah, Kayla,
because
jump
with
in.
my college, who are more responsible, it didn't play out very well. So I'm concerned about the high school. How is that going to play out?
Yeah, Kayla,
that's all.
It's Doreen, if you are looking for a lot of ideas and how to deal with that and how to motivate kids, then look up the stuff about flipped schools. There's a bunch of, I don't have specific information, but I've been starting to look through it. Like if you look up flipped classroom, it will give you more and more ideas on how to motivate, how to get kids involved and have them want to do it. It's just, if you look it up that way and go in there with the idea that you've got a bunch of people that you need to pull along that weren't very interested, maybe looking at the flipped classroom as a method, then you would get a bunch more ideas.
Okay, thank you.
Lonnie had a question way back. Is Lonnie still on here? I feel bad because I think.
Oh yeah.
Is he still on here? Lonnie, are you still on here?
I don't know if he is.
He had a question about parents.
Yeah.
And if he's
and I see Terry wanted to share as well.
Okay, Terry, did you want to share?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that one thing that needs to be repeated is the idea that whatever we're giving kids to do, we have to pare it back. It cannot be as much as they were getting before. Too many kids get overwhelmed if you give them too much, and that's one of the reasons that they aren't able to do it. So just kind of keep that in mind. Allison asked me a personal question about the upcoming CI workshop. Will it address remote learning? Yes, it will. Because we're going to be doing it remotely and we're going to be demonstrating like Kathy did today.
All right,
I'll put the link in the box.
I'm trying to see if Lonnie, I don't see, oh, Lonnie, you are still on here. Okay. Lonnie, can you unmute your microphone and share with me your question again? You had a question about parents, I think.
I think her question was about a parent with a special needs child. How do you help the child be the one to be in the pilot seat and making the choices instead of just getting the numbers on the tests that the IEP says they have to get? I think that was what she was kind of getting at.
Is that what she was trying to get at? Okay. I'll speak from experience on that one because my son it has autism, and so that's something that we have dealt with the whole time. And I think that's where you get into, remember when we were talking about the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 activities? When you have a situation like that, you're into a tier 3 activity. And that means, or a tier 3 support, not activity, tier 3 support. And that means it's not going to be something that just the teacher or just the parent is going to be able to handle. You're going to have to get in, have the teacher, the IEP team. I mean, by law, the IEP team has to address this with you. So that's where you're into that tier 3 support, where you really need to work with the teacher, talk to the IEP team, and figure out what's the best way to support my child. That's really, I mean, that's a legal issue, but it's also one of those things that moves beyond just what a parent or a teacher can do, because you have special ed teachers for just this reason, for those types of situations. I'm not sure if I'm addressing your question, Lonnie. If that's what it was, hopefully it was. If it's not, I think you're still on. If it's the same Lonnie, I'm going to put my email in here, and you can shoot me an email and we can talk a little bit more about it if that wasn't exactly what you were looking for. Okay. Other questions, or are we just hanging out to see what else everyone's talking about? There's like 50 people out here. So I didn't know if there was something else that people need to talk about, or you're just like me, like I just want to see my friends. And so, yeah. Okay. Okay, good. Well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop recording.